I'm here to share with you some insights about practical applications of AI technologies in manufacturing. Listening to the previous lectures, previous presenters, you probably already have quite a good picture of beautiful future which AI can bring us. So I will not try and repeat that. I will not try to blow your mind with the exotic examples, but instead we'll try to show you some practical approaches to AI implementation in manufacturing. Neil Jacobson, he was speaking about AI yesterday. I spoke to him a couple of months ago, and I asked him one question. I said, Neil, on your opinion, what do you think is the most important point businesses get wrong about AI? And then he said, oh, well, this one is easy. They think that AI is about future. And of course, they're totally wrong, because AI is something that happens here, and they need to do something about it now. And yeah, sure, he's right. I mean, I completely agree with him myself. But in the industries like manufacturing, which are capital-heavy, very conservative industries, we have a huge problem when it comes to innovation. We go to these conferences, we listen to all those amazing speeches, and we come up with a beautiful picture of some kind of factory of the future where everything is interconnected and orchestrated and self-learning and all these kind of things, and we are totally inspired. And then we get back, and because, of course, we want to share our insights, and we actually want to start doing something about it, we want to make it happen, we go to our boss. Or, well, if you are a boss, you probably would go to your CFO, and that's what you usually get. They're like, seriously? Come on, get real. What are you talking about? Suddenly, they're not that happy about the idea of innovations. But I tell you what, in fact, they have very rational reasons not to be happy. Innovations are not called disruptive for nothing. And these rational reasons are they can easily imagine all kinds of things they need to invest, they need to organize, they need to time and effort they need to spend to implement all those innovations, while by definition, because it's innovation, you cannot be sure that you're actually getting anything out of it. So when we are speaking about these kind of industries, again, capital-heavy, not very high profit margins, it's easy to imagine why these guys are not that happy. So I know a guy who's an executive of an industrial company. And he watched the presentation. This is a slide from the presentation from Exponential Manufacturing 2016. So GE was explaining how they approach to the innovations in their company. And this guy, believe it or not, there was just one thought he took away out of this whole presentation. Just one thing. And it's right there. So he came to me and asked me, OK, I get it. But, well, tell me, what if I do not have $1 billion for innovations to start with? In this case, what all these exponential technologies actually have to do with me? What am I supposed to do? And again, that's a very legitimate question. And he's a smart guy. He said, yeah, I understand. I totally understand. All the most exciting things happen right there at the top right corner, right, where we have the biggest value that can be achieved. And it is achieved because we bring the most disruptive changes. The problem is that's not something I can afford. And that's why me and so many of my colleagues in the industry, we are actually in the bottom left corner, doing some incremental improvements, saving like 0.5% of cost this year, improving output 0.5% next year, something like this. So I'm totally onto innovations. I would be really willing to consider innovating if you could offer me something like this, right? Something which doesn't require me to change my current processes much, to change my equipment, to teach my people, but still would already be able to show some measurable, tangible value I could, well, show to my shareholders, by the way. And, well, again, he's a smart guy. And he said, of course, I understand that it's just too good to be true. This kind of things never happen. There is no such thing as free lunch. But here good news come. I really, I believe that with AI, there is such a thing as free lunch for manufacturers. Because there is just one case when you can have your lunch for free. And it's, of course, when someone else have already paid for it. But first, let's just think about what AI is. When people think about AI, I mean, normal people, not people who visited a Singularity University conference, they imagine something like maybe self-driving cars, or maybe computers smart enough to win in Go, or maybe they think about Terminator and Skynet and all these scary things. What they don't think about is that AI is actually taking care of them already, now, every day. They just don't notice it, right? Because when you are searching in the internet for something, that's AI, which tries to come up with the best answer for you. When you are shopping online, again, that's AI that's suggesting the best products you may be interested in. And when you check your email, free of spam, well, maybe it's actually good they don't suspect that because AI is basically reading all their email to filter out the spam, right? So why I'm talking about all this? Because this is where this free lunch is. Because these are Googles, Amazons, and Facebooks of this world who paid for these technologies, who bring them to the level of maturity they are today. And surprisingly, these technologies and specific applications are very, very similar to many problems we have in the industry. Great thing about it is that, well, if you try to implement some AI project in, well, let's say, steelmaking or chemicals, you will really struggle with finding good, proven, mature AI solutions for this particular industry, or finding the data scientist who has experience in implementing of AI solutions in this particular industry. But if you are looking for those who, well, for technologies which are supposed to provide, well, recommendations for online shopping, for example, there are plenty of algorithms out there, and some of them are even available for free as open source. And the same as with talent. There are a lot of people who know how to deal with them. So the key thing here is that the problems from a mathematical point of view are very often the same. And why they are the same? Let me show you just one example. Magnitogorsk Iron and Steel Works, that's something we did. This very same algorithm, which won the first prize in Rex's challenge for online recommendations, online e-commerce recommendations, the very same algorithm came up with 5% of ferroalloys saving in steelmaking, somehow. And just to put things into the context, for those of you who are not from the industry, 5% is a huge thing, right? For the industry, which works with 7–8% profit margin in a good year, it's really a lot. And why was it possible? You just need to know where to look. What kind of tasks are compatible with this almost freely available AI? And let me describe for you main characteristics of these tasks, and then give you 3 examples of specific processes where you can find this kind of tasks. So first, you want to look for established repetitive process. It's very important because, in fact, it's something which allows you to start quickly. That project I was talking about with Magnitogorsk Iron and Steel Works, it was a project which we did in months, not years. Just a few months, you can have the kind of results. If you start with a process which is already there, because in this case, you will have a lot of data. That's why my examples will mostly come from production floor, because that's where you probably have the equipment with a lifetime of, 30 years. So you can easily have years and years of logs already accumulated and ready for AI to learn on. The second thing which you usually have in this kind of established process is well-defined measurable outcomes. And again, for this kind of algorithms, it's crucial that you know exactly what you want to optimize, and you can measure it in the real experiment. So this is something that you need to have to measure your success in the project. And now comes a less obvious thing, which is uncertainty. Because this is where the value is being created. You look for uncertainty. What do I mean? I mean that, well, uncertainty always means inefficiency. Let's just think about it. If we know exactly what happens and what will happen in our process, then for each and every case, we can just make the perfect decision, right? And we only spend that amount of efforts and resources that's needed. If we do not know exactly what happens, we have some rough approximation. That's what usually happens in many processes. Of course, we will provide for these variations, which means that we will waste some of our resources, some of our time and effort. And that's where the potential for optimization lies. Of course, AI cannot bring you, directly to this perfect situation, but it will bring you as close as possible to it, thus saving you money and improving your outputs. So now let me give you 3 examples of the processes where you can apply this kind of technology and come up with real savings, real value you can have the very same year. First case, that's what I already started with. It's saving expensive ingredients. In case of steel, for example, yeah, you start with some uncertainties, because scrap metal composition is different every time, right? And you do not know exactly what this composition is before you start melting it. Even if you knew that, material science knows exactly what happens in chemical reactions between a few elements. But when you have more than 20 chemical elements in your mixture, no one actually knows exactly what's going to happen. We have some rough guess. So what we can do with AI, we can analyze the previous data, figure out the patterns in this data, and come up with much more precise prediction about what will happen within our mixture and what is the amount of ferroalloys we need to put in. So if before we had to put more just to stay on the safe side, because we do not know exactly what it is, with better prediction, we are saving money. And of course, it's not just for steel. The same way happens with catalytic cracking when you want to save expensive catalysts. And the same way it works for ore processing, well, especially, for example, in gold ore, where their cyanides they use can cost up to 20 to 40% of all the processing costs. It's really very expensive. You want to save them. And they're also very harmful for the environment. So you want to use them as less as possible. And even in food mixture, I know of chocolate giant, actually global chocolate company, which is now experimenting with AI-based optimizing solutions for chocolate mixture. So this is the first type of situation. The second type of process where you can use AI-based optimization would be optimizing production routes. Let's say you have plastics, right? You have extruded plastic, and you need to stretch it, to thin it, to make plastic film. The problem is that sometimes you may have some minor anomalies within production process, which lead to hidden defects. So you look at it, you have some diagnostic capabilities, and you think that this plastic is fine. But in fact, when you go to stretching it, it breaks. And it's really a very bad thing for you, because you need to stop the line, you need to clean it up, you need to start over. You're losing money. And well, specifically with plastics, it happens quite often. So what you can do, you can use AI. Because analyzing all this previous data about what we did in the process and when we ended up with those breakages of the film, AI can recognize the patterns and came up with quite precise prediction that this particular bunch is going to create you problems on the way. So you just don't process it further, right? And you save your costs. And the same way it works for metal slabs, for example, right? Where you have a choice. If you know that there is hidden defect, you will have some failure further on, you can just choose to put it into the different production route, more, well, cheaper final product. And the same works for glass, and there are many processes in the industry where quality prediction for intermediate product would allow you to save a lot of money. And then third thing is about measuring the unmeasurable. Because again, very often, especially in process industries, we can't really measure directly in real time what happens in our process. Well, for example, you have gas fractionation unit. And you have the gas stream, which has composition changing very quickly in real time. And to have optimal output, you need to change parameters of your unit, right? In real time also. But you do not know exactly what this composition is in real time, because there are no sensors that are fast enough. And even if there were, even if you know exactly what your gas steam composition is, it still doesn't help much, because changing the parameters of the unit takes time. You need to heat up a plate within this distillation column. It takes time. So by the moment it's heating up, the parameters of the gas steam changed. So even if you knew what it was, it doesn't help you much. You are still not optimal. The only thing that really helps is prediction. You need to know what the parameters will be by the moment when your unit hits up. So again, you take AI, you use the data you have, it builds for you quite an accurate prediction about what happens within your mixture or steam or whatever. And you can save energy, because you do not need to heat it up more than needed. And you can increase throughput, and you can have more quality product. It depends on specific process. And again, it doesn't just work for oil and gas. The same type of problem, for example, in pharmaceuticals, when we are making those tablets, it's very important that the particle size, when you are milling it, is very, this is pretty much the same, right? So particle size distribution is a very important thing to know. And again, there is no direct way to measure it. The same way goes for elastomer viscosity, which is very important parameters, very hard to measure in the real time. And it's very good for AI prediction and can optimize your output. So getting back to what was that about? As we already said, fear of innovation is well-founded. So we need to take those concerns into consideration, and we need to work with them. Because, well, for example, that's why we call these kind of AI solutions being shortcut to innovation, because it addresses all of these concerns. In all these examples, the implementation doesn't require any capital investment, like at all. You can just outsource the service. You don't need to redesign your process, because you have the operator who changes those parameters. OK, now you're just showing to this operator a new recommendation. This is it. You stay where you are. You don't need latency deployment. It takes months. And the most beautiful thing out of all that, you can measure your ROI immediately, just right after you start doing this. And this is very important, because if you think about it, industrial sector is a huge part of the world's economy, right? It's a really very big thing. It's also responsible for half of the all world's energy consumption and 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions. So that's why making this sector more optimized, more efficient, is actually a great way to bring us closer to that abundant and sustainable future. But to be able to do that, we actually need to start now. Just imagine that if we could start implementing at least those things I was talking about today, we start implement them now, in a mere year, we could already live in a slightly better world, right? Because we could be more productive, we could harm our nature less, and this inspirational thing, believe me, it's also very important. Because, well, these are just the first steps. Right? What I've shown, it's not a revolution. It's just something you can do now and quickly. And because these are first steps, what we really need is to bring those budget-conscious guys in suits, right, those CFOs, we want to bring them on board. We want to make them, well, we want them to be inspired by innovative technologies, not scared of them. Being champions of innovation, not the obstacle. And it's not just my wishful thinking. Because in that example, with the metallurgical company, they actually ended up having their CFO a key stakeholder for this AI project. Because after measuring the effect and seeing by his own eyes these results in his P&L, he got so enthusiastic that he now shares his experience with his colleagues. In fact, in just a month, he's speaking at the manufacturing conference in Chicago about his experience. And I believe for all of us who is aiming to bring these innovative technologies, exponential technologies, into the real life, it's a very important lesson to take care of these guys. And if you are working for the industrial company, well, it's a very simple message for you. Now you know that AI actually can generate your first millions of dollars this year, in 2017. You just need to start now. Thank you.